Sikh mosques, temples, and synagogues, as well as countless churches and religious centers, where followers observe rituals and holiday services. Clinton's President Clinton faced many foreign policy challenges during his 2 terms in office. In addition to domestic terror threats, such as the Oklahoma City bombing, international terrorism proved to be a problem. On February 26, 1993, terrorists set off a bomb in a parking garage under the World Trade Center. This was a large complex in New York City that included 2 giant skyscrapers filled with offices and stores. The massive explosion rocked one of the buildings, and 6 people were killed in the blast. Thousands of others were injured, either from the bomb or during the evacuation as people fled the area. Authorities quickly identified a group of anti-American, Middle Eastern radicals as suspects in the attack. However, it took more than 2 years to arrest the primary suspects. Later, intelligence experts discovered connections between Ramzi Yousef, the terrorist who planned the attack, and Al-Qaeda, a militant organization of fundamentalist Muslims founded by Osama bin Laden. The goal of Al-Qaeda was to resist interference and occupation by outside forces, especially the United States, in Muslim countries. Damage to a parking garage in the World Trade Center was extensive after a bomb was set off. African embassy bombings. In 1996 and early 1998, bin Laden called on his supporters and other Muslims to declare war against the United States and Americans everywhere. On August 7, 1998, bombings occurred at 2 American embassies at nearly the same time, one in Nairobi, Kenya, and the other in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The explosions killed 224 people, including 12 Americans, and injured several thousand. Investigators quickly discovered that the bombings had been planned and carried out by Al-Qaeda. Within weeks, the United States launched missiles at targets in the Sudan and Afghanistan that were either confirmed or strongly suspected to be Al-Qaeda sites. Several Al-Qaeda members died in the strikes. Bin Laden was eventually identified as a leader involved in the attacks and went into hiding in Afghanistan. By the end of the Somalia. When President Clinton took office, there was an ongoing war in Somalia. In December 1992, President Bush sent 28,000 U.S. troops to Somalia to assist the United Nations with famine relief. On October 3, 1993, hostile forces led by Awad shot down 2 helicopters, killing 18 American soldiers. U.S. intervention accomplished very little, and the failure to properly support American troops became apparent. This led to the resignation of Secretary of Defense Leigh Aspin. Clinton decided to pull all U.S. troops out of the country and ended U.S. involvement there. However, Clinton continued to send U.S. troops abroad. He and his advisors developed a doctrine of engagement. Its main purpose was to enable the United States to maintain a leadership role in world peacekeeping efforts to protect human rights and to expand democracy. These goals were to be met while protecting American national interests. Conflict in the Middle East. In September 1993, President Clinton invited two leaders from the Middle East, Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, to the United States. Rabin was the Prime Minister of Israel, and Arafat was the head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. Israelis and Palestinians had been engaged in conflict since 1948. At the White House summit, the two leaders signed an historic agreement. The PLO recognized Israel's right to exist as a nation, and Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. However, the agreement did not resolve the conflict between the two groups, and tensions continued through the 1990s and beyond.
The Tutsi and the Hutus. Two main ethnic groups resided in Rwanda, the Tutsi and the Hutus. The Tutsis were in the minority, but had run the government whole or in part for much of the nation's history. In the 1960s, Hutus rebelled and took control, leading to tension between the two groups.
George W. Bush took the oath of office and became the 43rd President of the United States on January 20, 2001. Introduction. Warm-up. In 2000, Texas Governor George W. Bush defeated Vice President Al Gore in the Electoral College but lost the popular vote. This was the first time the loser of the popular vote became president since 1888. The election was also noteworthy because Bush became the second president whose father had also served in the office. Controversy surrounded the events that led to Bush taking office. Then Bush's presidency changed dramatically on September 11, when terrorists used airplanes to attack New York City and Washington, D.C. The events of September 11 led to a global war on terror. Meanwhile, Bush worked to advance his domestic agenda. He sought to reform education, cut taxes, and reduce regulations on business. (2000) election. In 2000, the economy of the United States was performing very well. The gross domestic product had grown by over 4% per year from 1997 through. Unemployment was lower than it had been in 30 years. Since the Soviet Union had been dissolved, the world was no longer a place where two superpowers were in competition with one another. However, there were still conflicts abroad, including in Africa and Europe. President Bill Clinton was popular, despite his impeachment in 1998. His vice president, Al Gore, was. The Electoral College result in the 2000 election was very close. The states that Al Gore won are colored blue. The red colored states were won by George W. Bush. The 2000 election. The 2000 election was extraordinarily close. Al Gore won the national popular vote by more than 500,000 votes, or half a percentage. However, the results in the Electoral College were not as clear. Each state is assigned a certain number of electors, based on its total number of senators and representatives. Generally, the candidate who wins a state's popular vote gets all its electors. The candidate who reaches 270 electoral votes becomes the next president. The outcome of the election came down to the result in Florida. The initial count put the popular vote margin at less than 2,000 votes, out of nearly 6 million cast. This triggered an automatic recount. The result in Florida remained unclear following the first recount, so more recounts followed. The two campaigns contested many recounts in court. Some recounts were in Bush's favor, and others favored Gore. More than 2 weeks after Election Day, the Florida Supreme Court ruled against a request by the Gore campaign to continue recounts. Florida's Secretary of State then certified Bush the winner by 537 votes. It seemed likely Bush would win Florida's critical 25 electoral votes. Caught challenges in the 2000 election reached the United States Supreme Court. Bush v. Gore. Despite the certification by Florida's Secretary of State, legal battles continued. In early December 2000, the Florida Supreme Court ordered a hand recount of certain ballots. It also permitted the counting of some ballots that before had not been certified. The Bush campaign filed an appeal with the United States Supreme Court. In a 5-4 decision in the case of Bush v. Gore, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the ruling from the Florida Supreme Court. It said there wasn't enough time to do the recounts. With no more options, Gore conceded the election. Bush would become the next president. The decision created a great deal of controversy. Since all the conservative justices voted in Bush's favor and all the liberals decided in Gore's favor, people had doubts about the Supreme Court's objectivity. Some people believed the ruling was partisan. The failure of the popular vote winner to win the election caused many to lose faith in the country's election. Terrorists steered a boat into the side of the USS Cole in 2000 and exploded a bomb that left a massive hole in its hull. September 11th attacks. The United States and other countries around the world have faced the threat of terrorism. Terrorism differs from traditional warfare, in which only soldiers are considered fair targets. Terrorists can come from all ethnic, religious, and racial backgrounds. Islamic terrorists launched many attacks in the 1990s and into the 2000s. On several occasions, they targeted the United States. In 1993, Islamic terrorists bombed the World Trade Center in New York City, killing 6 people and wounding another 1,000. In 2000, Muslim militants steered a small boat into the side of the USS Cole, a United States naval vessel anchored off the coast of Yemen. A bomb was detonated, killing 17 and wounding 39. But as Bush's presidency began, terrorism was not on the minds of most Americans. However, in the summer of 2001, United States intelligence